Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for the 1/6 scale scratch build initial production Tiger 1. It's been a while since I had any video updates, but I've been spending a lot of time working on the tank's Maybach V12 engines. Both of these engines that you see here are built using the new parts that I've been working on. Both of these engines are being built as display models only and will not be used in the actual Tiger 1 model. However, once all the molds are complete, a third engine will be built up, and that will be the engine that will be inserted in the Tiger 1 that's over there. Both of these engines look similar, but they are different. The engine on the left is the Maybach HL230, and the engine on the right is the Maybach HL210. Both of these engines were used on Tiger 1s during the war. The HL210 was the engine that was first developed for the Tiger 1. However, it was deemed early on in the production run that the HL210 just wasn't putting up enough output, so they designed then the HL230. The HL230 had more horsepower than the HL210. Both engines are very similar, but there are differences between the two. Since my model is being built as an initial production Tiger 1, it will be receiving an HL210 in its engine bay. Starting with the HL210, quick walk around of the detail that has been put into this kit. Both the HL210 and the HL230 are being designed as resin kits and will be added to the EastCoastArmory.com product line once complete. Both engines are about 75% ready, and as soon as I have some more parts, they will be added to the product line. Both engines share some common parts, namely the engine block or the crankcase. This is the crankcase here without any parts glued onto it, just so you get a nice feel of the engine. Here on top we could see the manifolds. If I remove here the air filters, we have the tank's carburetors. Now the carburetors, since this project is still ongoing, they have not been glued on yet and are removable for the time being. This here's some walk around of the HL230. Besides the two air filters, one of the main differences between the two engines is the way the magnetos are mounted to the engine. Starting with the HL210, the magnetos, which is this object over here, are mounted to the engine via the rocker arm covers and with these two large protruding mounts. On the reverse side of the mount, we have an air intake adjacent to the magneto. On the HL230, the rocker arms are missing their large protruding mounts. Instead, they have the magnetos were moved to the center column here, which also powers the fans. Because the HL210 has the magnetos on the rocker arm covers, the center portion over here is the gearbox that powers the tank's cooling fans, which we're discussing in an earlier video. Over here we have a transmission, and when the engine churns, so does this flywheel over here. The way this mounts inside the vehicle is that there's a drive shaft that mounts to this flange that propels a differential that will power the left and the right hand cooling fans. On the HL230, this design was changed. First, the gearbox, which over here have back on the 210, was a small little self-contained unit, while on the 230 it was added in complexity because of the magnetos. It has the 230 has a very large tower projecting from the center of the engine. As we discussed earlier, over here are the two magnetos side by side, and over here, this here is the axis panel for the gearbox that turns the fans. Rather on the 210, how it was a single flywheel mounted in the middle, on the 230, there would be two flywheels mounted on either side of the engine. When the engine turns, so do these. These flanges here, when mounted inside the vehicle, would then bolt to a drive shaft, and each would power a separate differential, which would then turn the tank's cooling system. When the location of the magnetos changed, so had to change the design of the air filter. On the 210, the air intake manifold used a single duct with three small air filters that were held together, which covers were held together via wing nuts. This here would then mount directly to the carburetors, and if we notice, it has a little tab pulling shape here. This is because the magneto here would have a cable that would come out of the magneto and into this portion here of the rocker arms. Because of this design, the air filter manifold had to have this thin profile. On the 230, the design was changed. Now instead of having that large air duct, there was a smaller air duct, and the three smaller air intakes or air filters were replaced with two larger ones. Here it is side by side for comparison. On the 230, typically the lids for the air filters were mounted on via the wing nut, as was on the 230, but also it's common to have latches, like cabinet type latches, that securely held the lid on further. The filters would still mount to the carburetors the same way they did on the HL230, or on the HL210, that is. On the HL230, the magneto still had to connect to the rocker arms, however, the cable would be a little bit longer. These three positions here are for bolting handles, and these would unscrew so you could get access into the rocker arm cover. I have these already casted, however, I didn't install them yet because they will be installed once the engine is painted. Moving down, we will talk about the tank's exhaust manifolds. Here, the manifold has its heat shield mounted on, and as of note, the left and right-hand side of the exhaust manifolds are different. They are not symmetrical. On this side of the manifold, the heat shield has a cone type appearance to it, while on the reverse side, it has a smoother but curved appearance to it. The heat shields themselves on the real vehicle would just be sheet metal covers that would bolt together. And this detail was built into the engine. On the reverse side, we have the actual manifold detail itself, as well as on the front, we also have the detail that would actually be the actual exhaust manifolds. Moving along, over here we have the tank's oil tank. Now the Maybach engine was unique in that the oil tank had a channel running through it, and this channel would be for a drive shaft that would be for the tank starter. The tank had a manual starter, which will be mounted over here later on, and this starter then had was chain driven through a drive shaft that would go into the starter, which would be on this side, which would turn the tank's flywheel. This was done for in case you need to start the engine manually and you don't have electrical power. But it's unique how it runs through the oil tank, like so. For here we have the oil tank filler, which is all one piece. We have the engine's fuel sediment filters. On vehicles of this era, it was very common to have sediment filters mounted to the engine or somewhere along the fuel lines. The way these worked was that fuel would flow into this unit, flow into this jar, and if the fuel contained any heavy objects such as rust from the fuel line or any other type of debris, the heavy debris would settle on the bottom of the glass jar here, and the fuel would then be able to flow through the rest of the fuel system. This was done to prevent any fuel line clogs or any type of fragmentation getting inside of the engine. The model here, these portions here are casted in clear resin. This gives the optimum realism for the kit, and once painted and built, the tank's fuel lines will be added, thus completing the system. Now, this is another differentiating key between the HL230 and the HL210. This engine here is the HL230. It utilized 2 of these fuel sediment separators. However, on the HL210, it required 4 of them. Now, we could see here that 2 have been added, and the other 2 are going to be added once I cast some more up. And with that, that concludes this video update for this 1/6 scale German scratch-built initial production Tiger 1. Stay tuned for more videos of more progress, and don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for more builds and more detailed components. Thank you.